Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. So I have two more firsts in 2,000 years on my spreadsheet called Signs, Jewish Specific. And these are kind of big. So the first one is for the first time since the Second Temple. We're looking at Israel 365 News. For the first time in 2,000 years, we've had shofars blown on the Temple Mount. But not just that. The full observance of the Rosh Hashanah services on the Temple Mount. And then, for the first time in 2,000 years, a Cohen, which is a Jewish priest, ascended the Temple Mount in temple clothes. So like the priestly garb that they wear. And we're going to talk about that. So two firsts, both in October. And this is starting to become like a series of firsts in 2,000 years. You can see column F right here. I have all these different things that I feel like are signs to the Jewish people. Like if you're Jewish, you would see these things and believe, wow, Messiah is coming soon. And I think that's significant to us because even though we're not Jewish and we know that the Messiah has already come the first time, I believe the Lord is preparing them for Christ's second coming when they will recognize him. So if you're a Jewish person and you have different things happening, including these things that have happened for the first time in 2,000 years, and you're like, oh my gosh, things are changing really quick, Messiah is about to appear, then I think the Lord is preparing them for when he does appear on the Mount of Olives. Okay, so, but yeah, column F, I mean, I have my last three entries in a row are first time in 2,000 years. I'm not going to review the entire thing. You can go watch, if you want to see the rest of them that I covered before this. I did this video for the first time in 2,000 years. Something is definitely happening. I'll put a link for that in the description box below. And I'll also include a few articles that go along with that video, like a Levite singing on the Temple Mount for the first time in 2,000 years, rabbis convening kind of like a rabbinic council to discuss Jewish law on the Temple Mount. That's a first in 2,000 years. Priests blessing soldiers going to war. That happened when this war started on October 7th, 2023. First time in 2,000 years that you've had priestly blessings for soldiers going to war. And there's more. You can also access the spreadsheet. The link is in the description box of each video. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's start with this one. For the first time since the Second Temple, shofar sounded on Temple Mount, silver trumpet sounded as call to war. We've already covered this one, the silver trumpet call to war. I talk about that in this video, and here's a picture of that. This is just right over the Temple Mount. Okay, but we're going to focus on this other part, the shofar, which is a ram's horn. Let me just show you a picture of that really quick, in case you don't know what a shofar is. Maybe you're new to the channel. This is a shofar. It's a ram's horn. And when we're talking about Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets, the trumpets being referred to is the shofar. It's a call to, well, for Rosh Hashanah, it's a call to repentance in the lead up to the Day of Atonement, which is Yom Kippur. Okay, so here's another picture of it. On Thursday, actually, let me zoom in. Sorry. On Thursday, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and by the way, let's look at the calendar really quick. You'll remember that the second solar eclipse, there were only two solar eclipses this year. One was the day before Nisan, which is the month that the Jews associate with Judah, and it's the month that has Passover. So the day before Nisan, we had the April 8th total solar eclipse that went over the Kirtland Temple and also Palmyra, New York, or the Sacred Grove. Then, 6 months later, a day before the month of Tishri and also the Jewish New Year, there was the second total solar eclipse. This one went over the Pacific as well as Chile and Argentina, but we had already noted in another Israel 365 article that the eclipse was taking place at the same time that it was turning, or it was becoming Rosh Hashanah in Israel at sundown. So that would have been Wednesday. Okay. Just want to point that out. There's really interesting things happening this year. Oh, and also really quick, I support Israel 365. They have a couple charities that I support. If you go to the description box, go down to this section called charities, and there's these two that I support. And occasionally I will interview them. In fact, I've interviewed the person that's written this article, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. He knows the people at the Temple Institute. In my last interview with him was about the red heifers. So you can go to my special guest playlist to see that if you missed it. On Thursday, okay, the day after the eclipse, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, a group of Jews smuggled shofarot, ritual ram's horns, onto the Temple Mount, and despite police efforts to stop them, blew all the requisite shofar blasts for the holiday. Okay, so this is part of the Rosh Hashanah services. They did all the blowing of the shofar, all the shofar blasts. You have certain blasts. Let me just show you really quick. These are the three types of blasts. So the following blasts are blown on Rosh Hashanah: Tekiah, Shevarim, and Teruah. And then there's like a last Tekiah that's a little bit different, but it's still Tekiah. So these are different types of ways to blow the shofar, and you do it at certain times. So I would encourage you to look it up on YouTube. Just do a search for like shofar blasts or Rosh Hashanah services, and it's really interesting the way that they do it. But they did all of these: Tekiah, Shevarim, and Teruah. Okay. It should be emphasized that this is most probably the first time since the Second Temple stood that the shofar has sounded on Judaism's holiest site. Josh Wander, a resident of the Mount of Olives, described the experience. Quote, "On the first day of the holiday, approximately 50 Jews ascended the mount at 7 a.m., interesting number, the first moment Jews were permitted to enter the holy site," Wander told Israel 365 News. Continuing, many of them were wearing their traditional holiday garb. They prayed the entire Rosh Hashanah service, which included 13 histakavayot, or full body prostrations. This is something else that we've covered recently. The Jews, this is something that we would not do as a church. We obey the law, and we also avoid anything that causes contention. But it's okay. They're not part of our church, at least not yet, or they're the other side of the church, but they're currently in an apostate position or condition. But over time, if you've been following it, they're starting to become more and more daring with what they do on the Temple Mount. And this is one example. So this is from earlier in this year. This was just September. So just a couple months, okay, time is going really slowly for me, you guys. Okay, so this was last month. They're starting to do this form of prayer where you lay down face first on the ground. Up until this point, I mean, there was a time where I think they weren't allowed to pray, or technically they were allowed to pray, but they would get in trouble if they did so. So they would just kind of quietly do it under their breath and everything would be okay. But it's getting to the point where they're now just like flat out doing this visibly in the sight of everybody. In we're about to cover, they're also showing up at the Temple Mount in temple clothes. So it's getting pretty, like the Jews are excited right now. The Torah commands Jews to prostrate themselves before God on the Temple Mount, and it is strictly forbidden for a Jew to prostrate himself in prayer in any other location. So this is something kind of special. You don't normally get to do this unless you go to Jerusalem, and then once you're there, you go to the Temple Mount. So that's kind of a special experience for them. This mitzvah, or commandment, is an essential element that will reappear in the times of the Messiah. Okay, quote from Wander. Birkat HaKohanim, the priestly blessing also performed. The priestly blessing was also performed. It was a bit inconvenient as the police did not permit us to bring Machzorim, the holiday prayer books, onto the Temple Mount, and as it was a holy day, we could not use our cell phones. Yeah, they don't use their phones on Sabbath, Shabbat, or on certain holidays. But several people, and by the way, when I spoke to Rabbi Gerfine, He's somebody that Israel 365 set me up with, and we talked for a long time, but he's no longer with Israel, no longer associated with Israel 365. He told me that on October 7th, it was a holiday. It was the very end of the Feast of Tabernacles, the 8th day. And I asked him, how did that day happen for you? I wanted to know how he experienced it. And I guess that was a day that they weren't using their phones. So they were kind of in the dark as to what was going on. Okay, continuing. But several people had smuggled printed pages into the site, and we managed to complete the prayers. When it came time to blow the shofar, one person pulled out a minimal-sized shofar, about the size of a hand, and blew the requisite notes. The sound was not very loud or beautiful, but it was the first time a shofar had been sounded on Judaism's holiest site since the Second Temple was destroyed. When they realized what was happening, the police rushed over and confiscated the shofar, removing the man from the Temple Mount. We continued praying, and when we got to the next section of shofar blasts, another person produced a tiny shofar and blew the notes. Again, the police rushed over, confiscating the shofar and removing the man. We continued praying, and every time we came to the shofar section, a different man blew a tiny shofar. In the end, 6 men were removed from the site, and 6 tiny shofarot were confiscated. But all of the requisite 100 shofar blasts were completely sounded. In addition, just outside of the eastern wall of the Temple Mount, a man was positioned with a larger shofar and chatzotra, silver temple trumpet. So this over here, where is it? One of these types right here, the type that the angel Moroni holds. Okay, so one of those. So we heard the shofar from both sides. Surprisingly, none of the people involved were charged by the police, and all the shofar were returned. Now listen to this part. Wander explained the prophetic significance of the event, referring to the book of Joel. And instead of reading it here, let's read the King James Version, and let's read the chapter heading. War and desolation will precede the second coming. Okay, verse 1. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. So you see how the Jews, they're thinking about Messiah coming. They would read this very literally, like we just read, like literally shofar was sounded in Zion, on the holy mountain or the Temple Mount. And so therefore the Lord cometh and is nigh at hand. Okay. So if it's important to them, again, if that's how they would interpret this, then we should probably pay attention, because it's probably the Lord speaking to them in a way that they can understand. Okay, continuing. The commentaries explain that in this verse, Sion, or Zion, is referring specifically to the Temple Mount, Wander explained. Okay, and that's all that I have for this one. Okay, so that's the first thing. The full Rosh Hashanah services being held on the Temple Mount, including the shofar being blown and doing the full body prostrations. Something that you only do on the Temple Mount. Okay, what's the next thing? Now, I don't have an exact date for this, so you'll see on the spreadsheet, I only have October, but it seems that it happened after Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so this is now my most recent one. Okay, full dress Cohen, or Jewish priest, which, again, just as a reminder, if you're not familiar with the Old Testament, okay, in the law of Moses, only the tribe of Levi had the priesthood. But within the tribe of Levi, you had the sons of Aaron that were the priests. They were in the priesthood office of priest. And then also within that group, the sons of Aaron, you had the one high priest, which represented Christ. Okay. So high priest, and then you had the priests, and then the rest of the tribe of Levi were the Levites. And they performed certain functions in the temple. including singing, teaching, and just like maintenance of the temple and stuff like that. Okay, so according to Jews, and they do keep a strict genealogy. Sorry about the siren in the background if you can hear that. They do that every day at noon. According to Jewish tradition and their record keeping and everything, these men right here would be descendants of Aaron. And actually, this guy right here, Baruch Kohen, if there was going to be a high priest right now, like if the temple was suddenly constructed, they have designated him as the high priest. This guy. I think that's him. It looks like him. I recognize his face, and that looks like him. Okay. And by the way, so they're wearing temple clothes. This is what Jewish priests and the high priest wears in the temple. Pay attention. It's actually going to describe it in more detail later on in this article. The Temple Institute announced a remarkable development that brought Israel one step closer to the third temple. For the first time since the temple stood in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, a Cohen, a male descendant of biblical Aaron, the high priest, ascended to the Temple Mount wearing the biblically mandated Kohanic garments. While on the mount, the Cohen joined in a prayer quorum and gave the priestly blessing to those gathered. Okay, so they did a group prayer on the Temple Mount, blessing those gathered. And let's look at the bigger pictures of that. So here's the one Cohen that came in his temple clothes, his priestly clothes, right? And there's the Dome of the Rock right there in the background. I'm actually I guess I'm not, but I am pretty surprised that they were daring enough to do this. I'm surprised that, the Muslims in the area aren't in an uproar. I don't know how many of them know that this happened, but here they are giving the priestly blessing. These two would also be Kohanim, but only this one in the middle is dressed in the priestly clothes or temple clothes. And then there's a closer up picture of him. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know, this is where the Vulcan live long and prosper hand sign comes from, because the guy that played Spock was Jewish, and this really impressed him when he was young, and he thought it'd be a good thing to incorporate into Star Trek. And he wasn't doing it in like a disrespectful way. He thought it was like a very noble thing for a noble species, like the Vulcans. Okay, moving on. Okay, so the Temple Institute prepared the garments in preparation for the return of the temple service. Yeah, not just the garments, but all the rest of everything needed for the temple, all the vessels and instruments. You have the showbread table right here. Okay, the golden table where you'd put the showbread, wine libation cup, wine libation vessel, just on and on. The Ark of the Covenant itself, and everything. And then, let's see. I've done multiple videos about this. The high priest's breastplate that has the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And they did a lot of research to figure out which exact gemstones these would be, because different names are used in the Bible. So a lot of stuff. Okay, they've prepared everything, including the clothes for the high priest, or for the high priest and the priest. Okay, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, a group of Jews smuggled shofarot, ritual ram's horns, onto the Temple Mount, and despite police efforts to stop them, blew all the requisite shofar blasts for the holiday. Jews have recently begun performing the commandment of prostrating themselves on the stones of the temple. So we've already talked about those two things. Again, here's a visual of the prostration. In June, a Jewish man wore tefillin, or phylacteries, which I'm not really familiar with that word, so you could just say tefillin. At the site, tefillin are this. It's a thing, again, it's a part of the Old Testament that they take very literally, and they put this on as they do certain prayers. I think they do it every morning when they do like the morning prayers. I have to look into that further. Okay, continuing. There are, in fact, 3 types of priestly garments. An ordinary priest, known in Hebrew as Kohen Hediot wore 4 garments. Okay, pay attention to this. Pay attention to this. What priests wear, it doesn't just have to be in the temple, I think, in Judaism, but they would obviously wear this in the temple. Okay? The ketonet, a long linen tunic that reached until the heels. Okay? And of course, it's white. Avnet, a long sash made of linen and red, purple, and blue wool worn over the heart. Migbaat, a linen turban wound around the head. And Miknesayim, knee length. Okay? Knee length linen trousers. In addition to the 4 garments worn by every priest, the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest, wore 4 more of his own. The Koshen, by the way, when you're talking about Judaism and in English they put CH, it's supposed to be it's supposed to be that like guttural sound. So I don't do a very good job at it. The Koshen, often referred to as a breastplate. It was a rectangular piece of cloth folded and hung on the chest of the high priest. Let's take a look at that really quick. So it's like this right here. Okay. So this is the high priest. Nestled within the fold was the Urim and Thummim, or the Urim Vitumim, through which God would communicate. The Koshen was decorated with 12 stones, each engraved with the name of one of the 12 tribes. The ephod, resembling a backward apron. Okay. The ephod was made from blue, purple, and crimson wool, linen, and fabric spun of gold. So the apron that the high priest wears, and it's interesting that it's the high priest that wears the apron. It's a backwards apron, but it's this right here. Okay, this is the ephod. Only the high priest. Interesting. A special mitzvah required, excuse me, that the neckline of the... Is that a typo? A special mitzvah required that the neckline of the email... Oh, sorry, wait. Did I skip for... Okay, sorry. The kosen was suspended from the ephod's shoulder straps, each holding a stone with the names of 6 tribes. So that's up here. And by the way, it's interesting because on the breastplate, you have... Dang it. On the breastplate, you have Joseph. Okay, so instead of separating out Ephraim and Manasseh, when it comes to the breastplate, you had this one right here for Joseph. And it's an onyx stone. Okay, and that's the same stone that's used for the shoulders. So you have like this like symmetry. You have the 2 onyx stones up here. Each one has the 12 names. And then this bottom one in the middle is Joseph. So I just think that's kind of interesting. Okay, let's go back here. Meir, which was a blue wool robe worn under the ephod. Well, actually, I don't need to read the rest of this. The high priest turban. Okay, so you get the point. So here's like the turban, the cap, however you want to think of it, worn on the head, apron, the tunic. So you have all the things. It's very, very interesting. And then here's just the regular priest or Cohen. So, man, this has been such a crazy year. It really has. I mean, look at this. The last 3 things that I have on here are things that have happened for the first time in 2,000 years. And those are the only ones for 2024. So we have the Cohen that came to the Temple Mount in full priestly garb. And then the Rosh Hashanah services being held in full on the Temple Mount, including the blowing of the shofar. And then on Tisha B'Av, that's when you had the first time that the silver trumpets, it's like the temple trumpets that the angel Moroni, that looks like what the angel Moroni is blowing. For the first time, those were blown over the Temple Mount. And then October 15th, 2023, that's when you had the first priestly blessings to people going to war. by a Jewish priest. And by the way, they do it by putting their hands on the soldier's head, the laying on of hands. 2021, that's the first time in 2,000 years rabbis have held an official meeting on the Temple Mount to discuss Jewish law. The 7th of August, 2021, so just 2 days before I started my channel, that was the first time in 2,000 years that a Levite had sung on the Temple Mount. And there's a video of that on YouTube. And like I said, this is the article. This is him. He's not dressed in priestly garb. Hopefully you can tell. And then I think this is the first one that I have. This is not so much like a Jewish ritual or anything like that. But March 26, 2015, a Judean date palm tree grown from 2,000-year-old seed successfully reproduces. This variety of tree had been wiped out around 500 AD. So the number of first-time things that have happened for the first time in 2,000 years, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of all numbers. So maybe this will be the last one and then the second coming. We'll see. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.